In this video, we're going to look at a new feature of PowerShell Universal v3. The new feature is Live Log View. So we've added Live Log View to a couple different places within the PowerShell Universal admin console to make it easier to develop and debug your different features that kind of didn't have great access to kind of what was happening inside them before. So the first place we're going to look is inside APIs. So traditionally, people would have to do some sort of logging themselves or return some data from the API itself to kind of figure out what's happening inside an API, but we've actually made that a little bit easier in this version. So you can actually click on the Edit Details button here, and what you're going to notice on the right-hand side is now you have a Log tab. The log is not active until you're actually viewing the log, and then from then it will actually pretty much log any requests that are coming into this particular endpoint. So if I click log, it's activated the live log, and now it's actually execute this endpoint from a PowerShell console. So I'm just calling invoke REST method here, and I'm calling my test endpoint and using the get method. And now you can see on the right hand side here, the log has instantly updated as I made that call. You can see the first line shows what method was used, what endpoint was called. That last ::1 is the actual IP address of the machine that's actually calling this particular API. From there, we see we have hello world, which is kind of coming from our script. So any errors or information streams, like things like this, or warnings, or even verbose messages will show up inside this log. So it'll be a little bit easier for you to see what's going on. And then finally, you will see the status code, content type, and content length returned in the log. So you kind of have an idea of how the execution went. So that didn't have great visibility before, but now it does. So you can kind of make it, develop your endpoints easier. So the other place that we added a live log is actually in the kind of diagnostics for the system itself. So if you actually go to General Diagnostics here, you're going to see that you are going to get the server logs, depending on how you've configured them here, directly inside this log view. So kind of depending on how you have your logging configured, it could be kind of noisy and it might be easier to download and search the logs. But if you kind of have it set at the error or information level, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of exceptions that may be happening within the server itself. So this is just kind of a good way to take a quick peek at what is going on inside your environment without having to download and unzip the logs and open a text editor and that kind of thing. And then the last two places that we actually put the live log view are in the authentication and roles scripts. So these are another place where it was kind of hard to see what was going on. But if you click authentication, and I have form authentication on, and this is kind of the only place that this kind of makes sense for logging in terms of authentication. We have the edit details button, and now on the right hand side you'll see that there is a log view. By default, it doesn't really log anything. We don't want to log out credentials or anything like that, but we are logging. I did add some right host calls into here, so you can see that I'm going to log the username and whether or not they were successfully logged in. If we go over to an incognito window here, and I navigate over to my PowerShell Universal instance, and if I were to log in as admin, what you're going to see is that now the logs show up kind of instantly as that user logs in. So it gives you a better way to kind of look at information coming from the system without having to write it to disk and then go to your PowerShell Universal server and all that kind of thing. Finally, we have added them to roles. So this kind of applies to all authentication types. It doesn't necessarily apply if you're doing role to claim mapping, but if you are using the actual claim policy scripts, we have added a log tab here as well. So similarly, I will log out of my in private window here, and if I log back in, now you're going to see that this role script has run. It's logged this right host call to determine whether or not this user is an admin, and I kind of logged out their username. So those are kind of the locations that we put this live logging. So to note, the live logging is not persistent. It doesn't store anywhere. It's actually generated and sent directly from the server to the client that's connected to it. So it's not really an auditing thing. It's more of a development and debugging thing. So as you're working on your scripts, you can see the live log, and it helps you to kind of fix bugs and implement your APIs, authentication, and role scripts. So in this video, we looked at the new live logging feature of PowerShell Universal v3.